100 Winters, Retracing the Great Race Against Death, written by Nathaniel Hayes, illustrated by Caleb Gingras. Chapter 2, The Journey of 12,000 Miles. January 27th, 2025. The date had loomed in my mind for 3 long years. I meticulously kept a daily checklist of the myriad tasks I needed to complete before it arrived. Yet that day would not mark the end of anything. It would mark the beginning of the most extraordinary challenge of my life. I'm a school teacher, a family man, and I live over 5,000 miles from the starting point. I would have to travel across an entire foreign country just to get to the beginning of this journey. How could I possibly pull it all off by launch day? It was like President Kennedy announcing America would put a man on the moon using mid-20th century technology. Sounds good, but the unseen logistics behind one small step for man were arguably more difficult than flying the Apollo 11 to the moon itself. As a student of the golden age of exploration, I'd learned 2 truths from nearly every biography. First, choosing the right team would be the most critical decision I would make. Second, organizing the logistics and securing funding to reach the starting line would, in many ways, be the greatest labor of the entire endeavor. Throughout my life, I've watched great leaders succeed by surrounding themselves with exceptional people. I've also seen insecure leaders fill their circles with weak yes men, creating echo chambers of narrow thinking. But when strong, capable individuals are welcomed onto a team, people with their own expertise, convictions, and constructive criticisms, extraordinary things can happen. I was determined to surround myself with men who were more skilled and experienced than I was in their respective domains. These men, each with strong ideas about leadership and team dynamics, would ensure the success of the expedition, or at least give us the best shot. At the start, the expedition consisted of 3 men and 10 dogs. The 2 others were dear personal friends. During the planning process, we grew to 5 men and 20 dogs, and eventually settled on 4 men and 16 dogs. About 9 months before departure, I was arranging an interview for my podcast with polar explorer Eric Larson. During our conversation, talk turned to my expedition, and I was overjoyed when he expressed interest in joining. Given his great experience and public recognition, I offered him the leadership of the expedition. He graciously declined, saying, "This is your vision. You've invested decades in this story and this breed. And at this stage in my career, I don't need to be in a leadership role. I'll be happy to participate and support you in your leadership." Eric's involvement brought a new level of public attention to the planned expedition, and his presence challenged me to next-level leadership. I took full advantage of his experience, seeking his counsel at every stage of planning. Jamie Nichols, a dear friend and one of the original 2 I tapped to join me, served as our chief engineer. Skilled in both machinery and backcountry travel, Jamie would be the first to tell you that his red hair and fiery eyes come with the stereotypical quick temper, but he was just as quick to pivot back to a constructive and conciliatory mindset. His capability, his work ethic, and loyalty always more than made up for any momentary friction. Because Jamie would be breaking trail for the first third of the journey and thus facing the highest risk, I connected him with my local village contacts in Alaska. I then handed over to him the task of planning our day-to-day trail choices between villages. Once introductions were made, I phased myself out of the conversations. Jamie handled the responsibility with excellence, requiring little input from me. My dear friend and filmmaker Jeremy Grant had originally planned to come along to chronicle the journey, but he was blessed with a position at a worthwhile nonprofit, one that also provided well for his family. After trying for weeks to do both, he had to withdraw. Eric then offered me a list of filmmakers willing to take Jeremy's place. Jamie, on the other hand, suggested we prioritize snow machine skill over film credentials. He rightly noted that he'd need support scouting ahead on the trail. After some thought, I split the position, one slot for a filmmaker and another for an experienced snow machiner to assist Jamie. I reviewed the bios and portfolios for days before settling on Caleb Gingras, who I believe is a rising star in the outdoor adventure film world. I fell in love with his eye for detail and artistic framing before we ever spoke. Thankfully, Caleb was just as eager to join the team as we were to bring him in. Tall and lean, Caleb was the youngest among us. With that youth came a lesser degree of lived experience compared to the middle-aged men on the team. Caleb took the brunt of our light-hearted ribbing, mostly about his being Canadian, and nearly half our age. But Caleb showed great strength of character. He learned quickly, adapted constantly, and took the teasing with grace. We all pitched in to help him get his shots, and he, in turn, never hesitated to assist the musher or snow machines when needed. For the final team spot, assistant snow machiner, Jamie had one man in mind, his longtime friend and fellow adventurer Jeff Kelly. I had a few other candidates, but I recognized the value of choosing someone Jamie already trusted. My hesitation was that their close friendship could create an us versus them dynamic in the trail. That concern wouldn't prove completely unfounded, but Jamie took the feedback with grace, and so I called Jeff. And boy, am I glad I did. Jeff Kelly was all Jamie said he would be and more. He was confident, yet humble, hardworking, but laid back, rugged, but not brash. Though his job was primarily to assist with the machines, he quickly revealed himself as a true dog man, often checking on the dogs at night or lending a hand when needed. 2 seasoned expedition leaders had warned me about the risk of surrounding myself with such strong personalities. Their warnings weren't without merit, but in the end, the 4 men who made up our team came together even under extraordinary stress. That's not to say there weren't tensions, but they were brief and harmony was quickly restored. How? Well, each man respected the expertise of the others. As expedition leader, I cast the overall vision and delegated roles and set expectations. I retained veto power over everyone's domain, but I only needed to use it twice during the entire journey. The terrain and temperatures in the opening days were brutal. They tested us. We tested each other. But by day 4, we were moving like a well-oiled machine. In short, the success of this expedition came down to one thing: surrounding myself with exceptional men. It's no wonder the great explorers of history often called the logistics of an expedition, the fundraising, supply procurement, routine planning, the hardest part of the entire journey. To most risk-averse people, this might seem trivial, but to those of us who live for adventure, logistics are the painful gateway to the glorious end. First, I needed more than 20 Seppala Siberian sled dogs of the right age and condition to endure the grueling 20-day journey. Since only about 100 of them remain in the world, this was no small task. When expedition planning began, I owned just 8. After breeding and acquiring the needed dogs, I trained them 5 days a week leading up to our departure, an exhausting full-time job on top of my school teacher's daily duties. That was just the beginning. Next, we had to transport 5 men, 16 to 20 dogs, 2 dog sleds, 3 snowmobiles, 3 pull-behind sled trailers, and more than 5,000 miles from Maine to Alaska before we could even begin the expedition. Once we reached the expedition's end in Nome, if we made it that far, everything would need to be loaded onto a cargo plane for the flight to Anchorage, then transferred back into the truck and trailer for the long haul across the continent to Maine. I created a spreadsheet and turned the budgeting process into a game, asking friends to guess the expedition's cost. Their guesses usually didn't cover the diesel fuel for the round trip, let alone other expenses. In the end, the sticker price was near $90,000. That's about 2 years bring-home pay for a school teacher like myself. Thankfully, generous sponsors like Native Performance Dog Food, Continental Kennel Club, Poland Spring Water, and others stepped up. Devoted friends, including Cindy Robbins of Poland Spring Resort, Jamie Nichols, master diesel mechanic, Richard Bailey of Cultural Web Design, and Deb Unruh gave their resources and time repeatedly. Just weeks before the expedition, everything seemed to be falling into place. But on New Year's Eve, a major setback almost derailed us. For 9 months, I had ramped up plans to include Eric Larson, training and outfitting 2 teams of 10 dogs so that he could mush alongside me. His gear and sponsorships were critical to balancing the budget. Then, in the final hours, I received his email. I might have to withdraw. His reasons were sound. He needed to focus on his career, wage earning, rather than his passion projects. This was, after all, our adventure, but his career. So I replied, I am excited to have you on the team if you are excited to be here. I want you here, but we don't need you here. In short, if you're not excited about the expedition, you would not do yourself or me any favors by continuing. Regardless of what you decide, I hope to keep counting on you as a mentor and a friend. Eric's response, thanks for the thoughtful reply. I appreciate your kindness and grace. I think I have to bow out of the expedition. There are various factors, but mostly I'm overwhelmed with all my other work. Ironically, I think this will be your best chance at success without having to manage 2 teams. Despite his withdrawal, I ultimately decided to take a full 16-dog team. This expedition was more about the dogs than men, and Seppalas are an endangered breed. Each dog had earned their spot on the team. After a week of reflection, I knew it was best for the breed to bring as many as I could to add this accomplishment to their pedigrees. Eric added, I've learned to trust my gut, Jonathan. I'll follow up more, but please know you are a gentleman and a scholar, and I have the utmost respect for you and this journey, which I know will be amazing. So we parted on good terms, but his withdrawal left a significant budget gap, not just for the second team's procurement, training, and gear, but for essential equipment he was going to supply. Despite months of obsessive preparation, when I left home in northern Maine for Alaska, I knew we did not have all the funds needed to get there and back. But this too was like so many of my Polar Explorer heroes before me, so it didn't scare me as much as it would have had I not been a student of history. I thought about the Israelites leaving Egypt for the Promised Land. God parted the Red Sea for them, but then when they reached the Jordan River, they had to wade into the river before God parted it. The expedition's preparations, like the Israelites' journey, had seen countless miracles of provision. But now it was time to get my feet wet. I pressed on, believing funding would come as the journey gained more publicity. On January 19th, Jamie Nichols loaded snowmobiles and gear into his 32-foot trailer and fired up his diesel Dodge Ram. The truck would not be turned off for 5 days. By afternoon, he had arrived at my home in St. David, where I had dog supplies and gears staged and ready to load. 2 hours later, we crossed the Canadian border and began in earnest, picking up filmmaker Caleb Gingras in Quebec along the way and loading his equipment. Countless logistical challenges remained, crossing the border with firearms necessary for safety. Our fourth team member, Jeff Kelly, flew to Anchorage with our firearms, and we met him there. In Alaska, we met up with one of the world's most experienced mushers, 3-time Iditarod champion Mitch Seavey, for dinner in Anchorage. I had trained and raced out of his kennel years earlier. It was wonderful to reconnect and glean his wisdom in those last days before the expedition truly began. The next morning, we visited with Jon Van Zyle, an original musher from the early Iditarod days, and its official artist for nearly 50 years. When Jon initially learned of my expedition, he offered to create an original painting to commemorate it. He commissioned 10 artist proofs and 100 limited edition prints as fundraisers. He also lent us 2 short-barreled shotguns. His encouragement and support for this undertaking is too great to enumerate here. Jamie's Ram and 32-foot trailer served us like the Fram or the Endurance or the other great ships of exploration, transporting us to the field of operation. Nenana, our first stop on the historic run, had planned a weekend of festivities to commemorate the centennial of the original Serum Run. Our team was to be the guests of honor, but Alaska, in all her brutal beauty, had other plans. An avalanche forced us to stay holed up in the truck for an entire night until the National Guard cleared the road. So we missed the community dinner, but spirits remained high. Our cross-continent trip had ended, but our journey was just beginning. Subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss a single chapter of this new book, 100 Winters. And since you're listening, that means you're enjoying it. So don't forget to go on to Amazon and purchase your copy of this book. We look forward to sharing chapter 3 with you, Nenana, coming up next.